If you look at it, it's on a consolidated file. It's about 4 years.
Oh.
That's about changing.
What's it, Port Alberni?
Yeah.
Yeah, I read those, yeah.
Okay. So
I wrote it.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll mention that.
Yeah, sure, Mike,
So I think they all seem good.
Yeah, it was,
all of them.
national average,
I think
in
there's one that
2023
maybe
was
they're not.
2.82.
I'm not
Might
sure.
have been unique, sometimes
But
they're very
it's
unique.
literally where-
Yeah, but I think that but I wonder,
2 out of the 3.
moving forward, because once in a while we see, is that something that we should be?
Yeah. But thanks for including that number because it would have been impossible to ascertain on our own.
No, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, you have to.
Because I feel,
We have to see my grades too.
Should I say that?
Yeah.
Should I?
Yeah. Okay, cool, thank you.
Yeah, you're
how
welcome.
I feel, because.
It's always AVICC or we don't get a bullet at LMLGA, but it's always they give one vote for everybody for when it goes.
So let's see that maybe, you think it's a good idea, but I'm just trying to understand how you know, maybe I think it's a good idea, but you don't, but maybe the other comes first. I'm just trying to.
Thanks, Trevor.
I'm calling to order the Town of Gibsons Committee of the Whole meeting of March 5th, 2024 at 3 p.m. And I'd like to acknowledge that we're gathered on the traditional territories of the Skokomish Nation. We first need to approve the agenda, moved by Councillor Kroll, seconded by Councillor DeAndrade. All those in favor? Motion carries. First we have Steve. Well, I'll go to Trevor Rutley to introduce Steve,
Sure.
our Director of Infrastructure. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor White, and my apologies for not being there in person. I'm getting a bit of an echo on my end. I'm not sure what it sounds like in the room. If it's okay there, I'll carry on. So thank you for the opportunity to present this strategic plan for the sanitary sewer system. We're grateful to have received that from Urban Systems. It is a really big document that will provide a lot of guidance to the town for years to come in planning the operation and improvements for the sanitary sewer system. I won't steal too much of Steve's thunder, so I'll just pass it over to him and let him give some background on where the project came from and what the results were. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. Can we bring up the PowerPoint? Do you have that visible to you?
Lisa, I'll bring it up on iCompass.
Unfortunately, I wasn't anticipating being sick today, so I was going to have it up on the laptop in the room there. Just 1 second, I'll sort out the logistics here.
Trevor, would you be able to share it? I don't have iCompass on this. Here, I'll just go to the Town of Gibsons.
Yeah, that's what I was what I'm hearing. See, I should be able to share it. Just bear with me.
So I've got it here if you want me to share screen. Would that work, Trevor?
Can he hear you?
I can, sorry.
Yeah. I think the question was, do you want to share? Do we share a screen on this side?
I don't think it matters too much. I think either way, whether it's me or Tracy sharing, I think it's probably
Okay.
Steve. Hey? So if you've got it there, Tracy, I'm about 30 seconds away, so maybe you can just share it.
Who gets that first? Lisa, yeah, thank you.
There's something.
Lisa, are you able to share it onto Zoom? The staff HDMI onto Zoom?
I think Trevor's got it up now. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to walk you through this plan. This has been a collaborative effort with town staff, and we really are grateful for all of their input as we've tried to capture a lot of the system learning that has been going on since your last plan was done in 2016, and to also inform a way forward that takes a risk-based approach to how you provide levels of service to your customers, both now and in the future. Next slide. So just, I'm sure these are top of mind for all of council, but the OCP objectives, here's some key ones that we have used to guide this plan. So recognizing the value and contribution of natural assets, providing for that replacement of infrastructure of assets by reserve funds, constructing, upgrading, or replacing public assets to meet recognized standards, maintaining those public works to satisfy public health and safety standards, considering and establishing levels of service in consultation with the community, operating and maintain effective, reliable municipal infrastructure supported by healthy natural assets, and managing growth so as to use land and infrastructure efficiently. Next slide. In addition, considering your eco-asset strategy and asset management policy, so maintaining assets in the most natural, energy efficient, and reliable manner, and ensuring that the town's services and infrastructure are provided in a sustainable manner with appropriate levels of service to all users within the town. So the methodology we used in developing the strategic plan was, one, taking stock of today, then updating and calibrating your sanitary sewer model, completing a capacity and condition assessment, both for the collection system and the treatment facility, and then doing a triple bottom line prioritization for upgrades to the system. Next slide. So a lot has been accomplished since 2016. You have completed upgrading to the Prowse Road lift station to improve system reliability. In addition, you have done condition assessment work of the collection system, again focused on improving system reliability, completed some upgrades at the wastewater treatment plant. You've significantly reduced inflow and infiltration as well as your base sanitary flows, and implemented a cross-connection control program, as well as been working on replacing aging infrastructure. So all very notable achievements since 2016. Next slide. So I trust everybody knows the system fairly well, but there are two primary catchments. The flows from North Gibsons flow by gravity directly to the wastewater treatment plant. And then the flows generally south of the highway, there's a few areas just north of the highway that flow down to the Prowse Road lift station and then are pumped to the treatment plant. The treatment plant is regulated by both the provincial municipal wastewater regulation as well as the federal wastewater systems effluent regulation. Liquid is treated to a secondary standard and then discharged to the ocean. The solids are digested and dewatered and then trucked off-site for disposal. Next slide. So here's a summary of your system performance on a sort of a per unit basis. On the far left, you'll see your subdivision development bylaw values, which again are sort of more conservative numbers for the designing of new systems. And then in 2016, you can see where the strategic plan had assessed your system and where it is in 2022. So as you can see, the base sanitary flows, those are basically the flows that are there in absence of inflow and infiltration, have reduced by about 17% since 2022 on a per person basis. Your groundwater infiltration has reduced by 60% since 2016. Your rainfall dependent inflow and infiltration has reduced by 35%, and resulting in your total inflow and infiltration reducing by 40%. That is remarkable considering that you haven't done a ton of main replacements or a ton of work in the regards of replacing. That's been just focusing on the areas of concern, but those are significant numbers, and so something to really celebrate in terms of staff's achievements in dealing with making the system as efficient as possible. Next slide. Here's the growth that has been currently forecasted within the town. Of course, this will need to be updated with the update to the official community plan. But the growth here is basically 9,200 people equivalent over the current population. And so that takes you close to 15,000 people with this sort of forecasting development into the future. For capacity and condition risk assessments, we've taken the approach of considering both consequence of failure and the likelihood of failure. This plan generally focuses on the orange number 4s and the red number 5s. So the idea being that the highest risk areas are dealt with first, and then if we can deal with other areas, then we do. But obviously focusing on the areas of biggest benefit and impact to the town first. Next slide. So for the current system, what can be seen in this graphic is that from a capacity assessment perspective, again, we look at generally pipes that are in the 4 or 5 risk category. There is only one pipe that's at risk today. And then in the future, there are only there's 16 pipes that are at risk in the future, which include the outfall pipe from the wastewater plant is the largest piece that's added. In addition, we've got a short section along the foreshore and a short section along Highway 101. Prowse Road Lift Station does have adequate capacity for future growth as currently forecasted. Of course, that'll need to be revisited once the OCP update is complete. Next slide. The recommendation from a capacity risk assessment perspective is to upgrade infrastructure with growth in a risk-based fashion so that the level of service is maintained with that growth. Next slide. From a condition perspective, and this is why it's so important that you've been doing work to maintain and address condition risks, you can see that today there are about 48 pipes that are at condition risk score of 4 or 5. But in the future, again, based on age, you're could be approaching 160 pipes that are at risk. And those are, again, largely based on age. A lot of the existing ones are based on actual video inspection effort records. And so we would recommend, of course, that be done on a regular basis, at least once every 10 years, so that you can make sure that your condition-based work are focused on actual issues, not just age issues, which are, it's just a proxy for condition. Actual condition will deteriorate, not necessarily directly aligned with age. So that's just a piece to consider. But your demands for condition will be increasing over time, which I'm sure is no surprise. So there you can see on the map, a lot of red pipe, again, based on age. The majority of all of your foreshore pipes, because of their location, due to risk, that puts them into the priority 5. But you can see that the red pipes are, there's a lot of areas in town that have red pipes potentially in the future, in 20 years. Next slide. So the condition-based risk assessment recommendations are to complete point repairs based on those video inspection records that have been done, re-inspect the system at least once every 10 years and prior to any condition-driven work. And prior to spending efforts rehabilitating the foreshore sewer, one thing that we've discussed with the town staff is to do a feasibility study to evaluate the opportunity to retreat from the foreshore and move those pipes up on the road above. As we all know, getting environmental approvals for work along the foreshore is becoming more and more challenging. Plus, the risks associated with failure of infrastructure along the foreshore are becoming more and more concerning. And so if there's the ability to move that pipe away from the foreshore, then that would obviously help reduce that risk. It would require any developments that are downstream, like along the foreshore, to pump up to the main in the road. And so that would be something that would need to be done over time, obviously, with those properties as they redevelop or as the town considers timing for actually potentially moving back from the foreshore. On this next slide, you'll see a picture of what we're potentially envisioning as a concept. So the purple line would be the retreated gravity line, and then the Prowse Road lift station would be pulled back from the marina driveway there and back to the an intersection one block back on Prowse, and a new gravity sewer there. So this is again a high level concept that would need to have more feasibility work done on it, but it just outlines a potential retreat option for the town. So in this plan for the collection system, we've got priority 1 projects, which address both capacity and condition risks. We've got priority 2, which address either capacity or condition risks. And then priority 3 projects, which address lesser risks for capacity or condition. And then priority 4 are any remaining capacity-based projects. Next slide. So as you can see here for the collection system, under the existing, there are no priority 1 projects, but we've got basically $5 million worth of priority 2 projects, 200,000 of priority 3, and then 100,000 for additional maintenance. When we get to the future, this future priority list includes about $8 million for priority 1 upgrades, 1.7 of priority 2, 200,000 of priority 3, and again 4.7 million of additional maintenance, which includes reinspection of the system every 10 years and some point repairs and pipe repairs based on that inspection. Next slide. So of this, you can see that 80% of it is growth and condition driven, and then 20% is condition only driven. So it is recommended that the town adopt a level of service to reflect funding priority 1 and 2 condition and capacity, plus those priority 3 and 4 capacity projects that are outlined. From a non-capital perspective, updating the sewer model and capacity assessment once the OCP update is complete. Update and recalibrate the model at least every 5 years. Continue to monitor flows and address inflow and infiltration issues as they arise. Update the subdivision and development bylaw to require a higher design flow for inflow and infiltration, just as a conservative measure to address future climate change risks. And then ensure source control provisions are enforced, i.e. grease traps and pre-treatment for high strength discharges, and ensure that emergency response plans are kept up to date and that lift station designs incorporate best practices. So that was the collection system. And then we also had a look at the treatment system. And as you can see here from a capacity perspective, the plant is fine under existing flows, but under future, the plant becomes deficient. And so the major pieces all become risk 5 under future conditions. So there is a need for a pretty major upgrade of the wastewater treatment plant. Next page. From a condition perspective, under the existing conditions, the headworks is at the worst, followed by the outfall. And then we've got the sequencing batch reactor, the UV disinfection, and the centrifuge are sort of in the middle in terms of condition risk. Next slide. So when we looked at scoping the timing of the upgrades, one thing to, it doesn't quite follow such a simple method as the collection system. So we had to consider the sequencing as it made sense from the plant operational consideration. But the first project is to upgrade the centrifuge 1, the aerobic blowers, and doing an update to the municipal wastewater regulation. So you're currently under registration, but with changes to the outfall in the plant, you will require an update to that, and that can take quite some time. So we're recommending that gets started sooner rather than later. Timing on this, having those works completed, is 2024 and a rough budget of 1.1 million. Second project is to do a geotechnical investigation for the wastewater plant from a risk perspective due to the upland slopes, and also to do preliminary design for all of the upgrades so that you can plan this out over the foreseeable future, and also to position you well to apply for grants. This here has a $600,000 budget, and again, it's triggered this year. Next one is the odor control upgrades. Those are based on capacity and triggered at 7,200 people, roughly in 2026, and a budget of 1.4 million. Thickener upgrades, similar timing, 1 million. Headworks upgrades, again, similar timing for about 2.9 million. Next slide. Then upgrading the main treatment processes, so the sequencing batch reactor and the blowers, which is about $200,000 in 2027. A UV system expansion in 2031 at about 1.3 million, and then your major plant expansion by 2033 for 13.2 million. So a total investment in the plant in 2023 dollars of just under $22 million. Next page. Here's just a graphic to show what the currently anticipated upgrading to the plant could look like. Of course, this will be looked at in further detail during preliminary design. Next slide. So the overall plan, as you can see here, and this is something that Lorraine has already brought forward to you in the financial plan. So you can see that it's not a very uniform expenditure plan, but it is one that can work within your borrowing capacity. And obviously, the benefit of it being later weighted on a number of these items is it gives you the ability to collect DCC revenues for growth-related items, as well as to pursue grant funding for the major expenditure items as well. Yeah, so just to recap, we've taken stock of today. You have an updated and calibrated sewer model. We've got a complete capacity and condition assessment of your collection system and treatment system, as well as a triple bottom line prioritized capital plan in order to help the town move forward in providing sustainable levels of service to your customers. So the conclusions are that the collection system has good capacity to accommodate a forecasted growth, but that will need to be revisited after the OCP update. The condition of the collection system will need greater attention as the system ages. The treatment plan and outfall will require considerable attention to address condition and capacity concerns, and prioritization of the completion of pre-design and the municipal wastewater registration is the highest priority. And that risk-based capital plan totaling 37 million is outlined to help ensure that the town can provide the desired level of service both for existing and also for future customers. Next slide. So the recommendations as mentioned, so complete an update after you do your OCP, update the strategic plan every 10 years, prioritize that inspection of the shoreline service connection to ensure that any failures are addressed before they impact the system performance, ensure that their source control provisions are enforced, keep that up, the emergency response plan up to date, continue to do ongoing CCTV inspections, and update the subdivision development bylaw, as mentioned, to address increased I&I. Next page. Video inspect that system once every 10 years. Continue to prioritize ongoing monitoring and optimization of the plant performance. Regular condition assessments to address deterioration. And prior to spending efforts on the rehabilitation of the foreshore, complete that feasibility study to look at relocating the sewer inland and diverting further flows from Upper Gibsons. And then incorporate this capital plan into the overall financial plan, as well as the DCC bylaw update, and apply for grants as they become available to reduce the financial impacts. So with that, open up any questions.
Thank you. Questions, Council? Councillor DeAndrade.
Thank you for the presentation. Really good. I understood 99.9% of everything.
You can ask all the questions.
Sorry. So you presented the future, like with different timelines for the treatment, but when you say future for the collection, it follows the same, or is in 10 years?
It's the same growth forecast.
Okay.
The treatment plant just gets triggered earlier due to the capacity constraints of the system. You have much less constraints on the collection system, so those are a little bit later on in terms, and there's fewer projects there. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I have another question. That is on the sanitary sewer flow history. With the reduction. So the base sanitary flow, I understand, because we reduce water consumption, therefore we reduced
Right.
70%, but I'm trying to understand what did the town did to reduce groundwater infiltration and rainfall dependent? Because in my mind is, I'm trying to picture this.
Robert, do you want to speak to that?
Thank you.
Specifically, through the mayor, over the years, the town has undertaken some smoke testing as well as CCTV cameraing. So some methods to investigate where there might be infiltration getting into the collection system. So thinking about maybe cracked grout along at manholes, or maybe where service connections have punctured into a sanitary pipe, where you might get groundwater or surface water infiltrating into it. So through recurring cameraing work and some preventative maintenance, we've been able to reduce that infiltration into the plant. Certainly there's we do notice spikes still in the inflow when we do get significant rainfall events, but as Steve has presented here, it's certainly less than it has been historically.
Thank you. And I want to acknowledge that Councillor Lumley is with us by Zoom. I don't know if he's there as a panelist to be able to ask questions yet, but he's at least following along. Hello, Councillor Lumley. Does anyone else hear?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, there. Okay, do you have any questions? We can hear you.
No, I mean, it's a pretty comprehensive report and it's, I mean, obviously it's necessary, all those things, but I guess my, and it's budget time. So my last one, and I think I raised this with the SCRD during budget, is that, I mean, when we're redoing our DCCs, when we're re-examining our developmental cost charges, like I think the portion of those charges, or if we can, like it's not just like the DCCs should not just include that section of pipe that goes in front of someone's home or business. There has to be some way of computing because sure, like you put a pipe in the ground, but the expansion or the growth also puts pressures on every other area of the system. So I don't know if that's something that can be calculated into DCCs, thereby increasing them a bit, covering off some of those retrofits of equipment that is affected by all development.
Go ahead, Director.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I think we do certainly, with larger developments, take that into consideration for large scale developments where there's an expansion of the density in a development. We would be looking to have some modeling completed, which wouldn't just look at the collection system and the frontage improvements, but if there's any need for increasing pipe size downstream that would be impacted by development, and also looking at the capacity at that treatment plant. And one of the benefits of this, having this plan updated, is that we can look at not only kind of date triggers based on projected growth, but we can also look at some population triggers as well. So if we are seeing some expedient growth over the next few years, that we're not projecting expansion requirements based on 2% growth and seeing 5%, and then scrambling, we can look at the population triggers of once we get to X number of people, we're going to have to expand this portion of the treatment plant. So it certainly is something we would take into consideration, but particularly again with the developments that are looking for an OCP amendment, rezoning, additional density.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor White. And thank you for this report. It was sort of daunting going through it and realizing, how much we're, the system works and we take a lot for granted. And it's, when you see all the maps and the sewer lines and one thing and another, in some of the support documents you presented with us, there seems to be a fair amount of materials that ostensibly shouldn't be flushed. And I'm just wondering if, I know there's been, in the past, we had some things about alerting people about the potential hazards of disposing of grease down the drains, but there seems to be a lot of materials that were categorized as sanitary materials. And I'm just wondering how extensive these materials are impacting with the efficiency of the system. In some of the photographs you presented, there seemed to be some rather significant buildups and accumulations of these, but how drastically is it impacting on the efficiency? And I'm suspecting we need to remind people that there are items that should not be flushed.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would say that it certainly adds some operational time, and there have been some manholes, I believe, in the kind of the lower area downstream from kind of where you'd see more of the commercial properties where there have been issues with grease buildup in the past. I wouldn't be able to quantify kind of what that impact is. I'd have to kind of maybe do a little bit of digging and discussion with their operations manager as far as trying to quantify that. But certainly, the more or the things that people shouldn't be flushing down the system that are getting flushed down certainly does add to the labor in cleaning the headworks. It's a good reminder that with utility bill season coming up, that we do make sure that we've got communication. I think typically I see that when having received the bills, utility bills as well, that communication is in there. But we'll make sure that we're addressing some of these non-flushable items that make their way into our system.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. And congratulations to staff on the sanitary sewer flow history reductions. That was very impressive. Through you, Mayor, my question is, with this updated information from Urban Systems, and when you see things in the report like likelihood of failure, as well as other important results, would it make sense to have this information contained in this report included or noted in our reports when we're considering development or zoning in areas that might be specific to some of these high-risk areas?
Do we have other discussion on this, Council? Or Councillor Kroll?
I sensed reading the report, because we're looking at reviewing the OCP, that some of Councillor Thompson's concerns, this report needs to go hand in glove with the work that's being done on the redevelopment of the OCP. So I think there's a great opportunity to flag some of your concerns right there. Mm-hmm. None of it can happen soon enough when you look at some of these potential looming costs. So it's, but I think we do have this unique opportunity that we're on the threshold of redoing the OCP to capture some of these concerns that have been flagged here.
And the update of the DCC's bylaw too, as Councillor Lumley mentioned. Does staff have any additional, Director?
If I may, through you, Mayor, this document was referenced in the RFP that went out for the OCP update, so it will be considered a reference document for the official community plan update, as well as the project list and financial projections that are included in here will be, again, taken into consideration with the DCC bylaw update. I think we're still, as staff, considering exactly how best to use this document for incorporating into some of our planning as well, and in communication with the planning department, and staff intend to bring a report back to council in the future with some recommendations for adopting this as an official policy document. We just need a bit of time to flesh out exactly what that would entail.
CAO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just further to Trevor's comment. I guess this information, it will show up in different places. It's not just sort of our implementation part. You'll see some of it in the OCP, as we talked about. The other aspect is the development cost charges bylaw. So what, particularly on the system the growth part of things, which is what the CCs are for, is for future growth. And the treatment plan, you'll see more of that in our capital program, those types of improvements, which then get translated into either a DCC or like a latecomer charge as we have for the process station. So the last one is in the subdivision standard, so that and I think generally speaking, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen, that we do okay on that end of things. Is that are we building enough capacity in our system that are big enough? And I think generally the answer would be yes. So we'll make sure, and this report that Trevor is talking about on the implementation is, we'll talk about these different areas, so there will be a series of interventions, I guess.
Thank you. Any more questions or discussion on this? Councillor Kroll?
Thank you, Mayor White. This perhaps would be for our Director of Finance. Currently, we have the annual 5% increase for water and sewer. In the report that you gave us earlier, we seem to be on top of things with what you've projected, and I'm assuming from what was commented during this report has been part of, you had access to this report when you were generating your earlier report to us on water and sewage projections for the next sort of few years. My question would be, is our 5% with sewage sufficient in light of this report to keep us sort of ahead of things?
Go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the 5% for this year was a really conservative or a gentle approach to the long-term financial plan, and the future, I don't know if you remember, the future increases are going to have to be higher, and part of that is to enable the town to service the debt that's going to be required to implement these changes. And so there's sort of two areas. The 5% short answer isn't going to be enough, because we're going to have to, if we don't get grant or development cost charge funding for the relevant areas, we're going to have to incur debt, which of course triggers debt servicing. So we'll have to have higher increases there. The other pressure is that in the near term, the debt are the requirement for debt are covered within our debt capacity. In the longer term, that's going to be a really significant pressure, and so longer term, that's going to have to be readdressed. For the near term, it is, but it puts a lot of pressure on our debt capacity.
Just as follow-up, thank you, Mayor White, and thank you, Director of Finance. If we increase, because the increase for water and sewage is a flat rate that everyone pays regardless, if we were to increase that and that goes into reserves, if we didn't need it here, that can be transferred to other areas as reserve funds to pay down taxes, correct? Does that make sense?
To you, Mr. Mayor. So the funds we collect for sanitary sewer have to be used for sanitary sewer. And so it really is within that envelope. The benefit of collecting more money than we need, which I've never been in a position yet, but if we ever get that would be amazing, would be that then we could be more proactive on our approach to both collections and treatment, and we wouldn't have to be as reactive to do a catch-up. Yeah, there's no shortage of uses for extra money.
Just one follow-up, and I appreciate the capital word that you used, being proactive, because nothing seems to be getting cheaper. And if we can get the dollars today to pay for it tomorrow, as opposed to trying to get it tomorrow to pay for it in the future, I think, we're potentially ahead of the game. So I think we seriously need to keep that in mind when we're reviewing the water and sewer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kroll. I think we're probably finished with this item. Thank you very much, Steve, for all this excellent work and for your presentation.
Very much.
You have an additional comment there, Councillor Kroll?
And just to echo what Councillor Thompson said, it's an amazing report, and kudos to staff for what they've managed to accomplish within the parameters of getting us here. It's been a huge eye-opener, and, hopefully we can move proactively. Thank you.
Now we are on to item 3.2, which is the general operations budget update. Update number 1.
Thank you, Mayor. And so, yes, the purpose of this report is to provide an update following the direction that staff received after the February 23rd Committee of the Whole meeting, which you reviewed the first version of the general operations budget. And so at that meeting, committee recommended that the budget be revised to reflect a 3% tax increase as opposed to the 7.5 that was originally proposed. And council or committee provided direction on how you wanted to see that happen. And so the changes that we made are listed on the page 1 of my report, and they include a removal of the surplus that was reflected in that original budget. We've made some increases to planning and protective services revenues, prorated those for the first year because they need some time to get those bylaws in place. We've reduced some budgets to professional services and legal fees in 3 areas. And I've also increased some transfers to reserves just to fund some one-time costs. And so the budget being presented today reflects a revised property tax increase of 3% with no projected surplus, and bringing it to today for your discussion and any future direction that you want to provide. Thank you.
Okay. Great work. Thank you very much for the work in tightening things up as council requested ambitiously. I'll acknowledge. Are there any questions from Councillor DeAndrade?
Thank you. Well, thanks for making miracles. I got curious with this item. I cannot identify. What is general sundry revenue? Thank you.
Go ahead.
To you, Mayor. It's a general sundry, and it's just basically a big catch-all of just really miscellaneous items that we get that, like someone will come across the counter, and back in the old days, they'd pay for photocopies, and we'd get revenue for that. So it's just really small bits of revenue that it's just like a bucket for that, so.
One piece that's certainly I've alerted council to that's come to my attention the last few days. It's something that we've all been having discussions about too, which is the community festival item, which is on page 260 or page 4 of the budget. And just this whole area in particular, there are some other items there too that I've managed to confirm today through staff that the outrigger race is not expected to happen again. And also I think there was just an oversight maybe on my part, because I was going to ask about this before, but the Gibsons Senior Society, the $5,000 has kind of been paid out already for the whole term from because we put in $20,000 into their capital project to help pay for permits and fees. So there's about $6,000 there from those 2 budget lines that and there are now 2 requests in coming to council for community festival ideas and hopes for funding, which we don't necessarily have to allocate directly to those proposals yet, but we could put some funds, move those funds into community festival in order to consider them when those requests can come in more formally. There was one request that already came in, but not all of council was here to immediately consider that. And there's another request that will be coming in about Canada Day, I understand, that I've just heard about today. So we could move those funds into community festival. There's another line called public relations that can pay for these things too. Ultimately, if we need to, we allocated $1,000 to a Squamish Nation event last year that kind of came last minute and was quite justified to support that. But yeah, one of these festivals is actually proposing to integrate that into their events. So there's I'll put that out to council and see what you think. Councillor D'Andrade.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm supportive. I think even the amount that this particular group requested is quite reasonable for the 2 days that the activities. I think it's important. We should have something we always had in the past. And even though this won't be the scale at Sea Cavalcade, but I think the ideas are great. And I look forward. And I think the people who are leading this proposal, they're very experienced, and I look forward to. I'm just concerned, is there a timeline for approving all this? Because I suspect there is, right? So I'm just, I agree with you, Mayor, but I'm just concerned with if we just put on just assign a general, but we still have to approve. So that's my only concern.
Yeah. I've got a few different councillors now, including Councillor Lumley. Just to answer that, I only received an update from Ocean Fest on Sunday, so I shared that with council. We haven't been able to get that into an agenda yet. I don't recall if there was a tight timeline on that. There is this Canada Day. I think there's an agreement that is going to be a presentation on the 19th about this proposal, so it's something that maybe council would want to listen to and to have the context of the different options we have before making decisions. And I've got Councillor Lumley first. I was texted to, I don't see it on the screen, but apparently he's... His camera's off, but he can hear us. Okay, Councillor Lumley? He might be muted. We'll go to a different councillor while we get that going. I saw Councillor Thompson and Councillor Kroll both put their hands up. Councillor Thompson.
Here I am.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I just wondered, maybe instead of moving it or creating a line item or moving it into an item, why wouldn't, because if it's fees, if it's in kind, and if I'm not mistaken, what they're asking for are revenue generators to the town. So maybe we could just let it flow through, and at the end of the year, you'll just calculate whether your fees and were up or down that year, and you don't even have to really kind of worry about it. It would be a calculation on next year's budget, if you know what I'm saying, instead of specifically allocating money. Because if they're just asking for permits and fees in kind, that's just revenue the town wouldn't get. So
They're not. They're not.
That's what it says on their budget.
Yeah, but you'll see they're also asking for $5,000. So that's what we're talking about right now.
Oh, I thought we already poo-pooed that. So, okay, sorry.
Well, you did.
Yep. All right.
Councillor Kroll.
I think Councillor Thompson was ahead of me.
Oh, all right.
I think the question, through you, Mayor White, the question you were asking is, should we move some of these funds that you highlighted to a community festival line, which I approve. Who gets the money remains to be discussed, I think. So I think the question at this point is that the funds from the Senior Society and the Outrigger race, and there's also the line with the Gibsons Public Art Gallery. They receive money, but they also receive a permissive tax credit. So, and I know I've questioned this before, why do they get both?
Yeah, that's up to the discretion of council. I think I was surprised to come to council last year and see that there was a tax exemption, there's a line item, and there were also grants of assistance going to the art gallery. The line item was supposed to, I thought the point of having a line item was to not need grants of assistance. So I think maybe they did get a grant of assistance last year. So this would be another, that's already going to be denied them this opportunity this year. But it might have only been 500 or something. I don't know. Do you remember, Director?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I remember that they received one because they've received grant assistance quite regularly, but I don't remember the amount.
Yeah, okay. But that is a consideration too, is that I know council has discussed for a number of years the logic of providing a line item and tax exemption at the same time. So Councillor Kroll, or did Councillor?
Did you want to keep going?
Yeah.
Just a brief follow-up, because, you know, I'm all for the arts, don't get me wrong. This presentation that's been brought forward is very art-oriented, which is in support of the arts. We have the Arts Walk, or, you know, the Art Walk. And so I think there's a number of things there. You know, in light of some of the things we're looking at and trying to save money, I just think some of these things we have to look a little harder at, that's all.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're looking at this whole budget. We've already changed it quite a bit from last year, but there are others to look at too. And equity too, considering, I mean, are there legacy pieces here where some groups have received line items just because they asked for them, whereas other groups are out there that haven't, you know, there's still there are a lot of nonprofits in our community doing great work. Councillor Thompson.
I was just going to say, I do agree with the community festival budget line. I think it makes sense. And it's encouraging to see so many, you know, well, 2 or 3 applications like this come forward, you know, volunteer-based. It's nice to see that. And I think creating a line item like this opens up the opportunity for us to be able to look at some of these events that are being proposed. So I'm largely in support of that.
Okay, so I'll look for a motion to move 5,000 from I guess it's line 29700 and 1,000 from line 2-27800. Or no, those are not specific lines, are they? 'Cause it looks like they're just categorizations. So the Outrigger race line and the Gibson Senior Society line, 1,000 from Outrigger, 5,000 from Senior Society, and I'll leave it to discretion of council whether there's any others. But if anyone wants to move those two or make a motion with those two in addition to anything else, I'll look to council and move those to the community festival line. Councillor Thompson? Yeah. Okay. So those two, seconded by Councillor Kroll. Any more discussion? All those in favor? That motion carries. I don't know if Councillor Lumley, I think Councillor Lumley said he was in favor earlier, so I assume he's in favor. Haven't heard him saying nay.
You got me.
Okay, I'll take that as a positive. Any more discussion on the budget update or changes? Okay, seeing none, we will go to 3.3, which is the update on property tax implications of future policing costs. I'll go to
Thank you,
Director
Mayor.
of Finance.
So this report is to provide an update regarding the funds that have been set aside to date, as well as some options for council to consider for this year. So I think everyone's quite familiar with the situation that the town is facing once, with respect to future policing costs, once we reach the 5,000 population. And proactively planning for this is a priority in council's strategic plan. So one of the reasons I'm bringing it forward. So currently, total annual allocation is 10% of taxation. So 5% was approved in 2021. Another 5% was approved in 2023. And so right now, as of 2023, approximately $400,000 per year is going forward to a reserve each year. So that's where we're standing right now, if no changes were made. I presented 3 scenarios in the report just for your discussion, just for discussion purposes. And just a reminder that the scenarios is based on the town reaching a population of 5,000 in the 2026 census, and that an estimated additional annual funding of about $1 million is required at that time. And we really don't know if the 1 million is maybe not enough. Chances are good it's not enough, but it gives at least an order of magnitude as to what we're aiming for. And so scenario 1 is basically to keep it at 10% and postpone any additional increases until 2026. The second option, 2A, is to go partway to reduce the gap, and I provided a suggested 2% tax increase per year over the next 3 years, and that, again, is just for illustration purposes. And then scenario 2B is to keep going with the 5% and add an additional 5% each year between now and 2026. And so page 4 of my report, I've provided some numbers for each scenario that gives you what the annual funding would be collected under those 3 options, as well as the gap that would result by the end of 2026. And I've also provided an estimate of what the tax impact is on the average residential property, and that's on page 5 of my report. Recommendations are on page 6, and it gives one for each scenario. And I'm looking for direction on what council might want to do this year for this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a question about the timing of looking at it in the context of the budget process. Is this something that we could, I guess, why are we looking at it now? And is this something that we could look at next year, provide direction to earlier on, like just to kind of set the, or is it, did other things need to be sorted out before we could? Yeah, it's just up to council.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's been part of, it's just have landed here naturally, I think, because historically or previously it's been seen as addressed as an add-on. So, deal with general taxation, our base, and then here's the piece of policing that goes on top. But now it's getting so pressing, and so if you wanted to revert it in the future, absolutely.
Yeah, I think next year we should look at it pretty much first. I mean, utility fees need to be first, or? Mr. Mayor, utility fees do need to come in January just because of the timing of the bylaw, but this could be brought at the same time. Yeah.
It's pretty much a standalone report because it's really quite a specific item, and it's a good idea because then it's basically set and then the general's on top.
Yeah, I think I'd like to. Yeah. Do we need to do a motion for that, or is that just something we can? Somebody will remember to do that. Okay, great. And yeah, on this more, I mean, I think we've generally been proceeding this term that scenario 2B is the one we pretty much need to do, the 5% in order to do this sustainably and not have to incur a massive. Well, we're getting better and better, so maybe it's not quite massive yet, but I'd rather not have like a 10% or 15% tax increase when 2026 comes around, 2027. Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White. I think we know we're not going to escape this. Now, just out of idle curiosity, unlike the 5% that we have for sewage, this money that we're accruing is going into a reserve fund. If comes the day and the government says, well, you poor little community, we're not going to ding you. We do have this as a potential reserve that could be spent on other things, yes?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So I set this one up because generally in the long term, when I was talking to colleagues who have gone through this maneuver, and there is on the other side of policing, there's 2 ways you could do a specific RCMP reserve, which was quite tight as to this is only on RCMP, and keep it more broad where it's basically part of our general operations. And I chose the latter version just because I wasn't sure where the timing's going to be a bit up in the air potentially, so it does provide some flexibility. Yeah.
So, no, I appreciate that. I don't think we're going to avoid it. So, when the cost hits us, even what we've got in a reserve is only going to soften the initial blow. The next year, we're going to be faced with the cruel, hard reality of what it costs. So, with the way you've set this up, we could even use it to soften the impact of this increased cost of policing over a couple of years until people got used to how painful it really is. So I really appreciate how you've set this up and certainly support scenario 2B.
Yeah. Now, one update I have too is that just received, now, I think as council's aware, I have been advocating, we've been advocating Councillor DeAndrade and Councillor Kroll spoke to the minister at UBCM, and I've sent a letter recently really urging the minister, because I know there are, it's been announced there are going to be preliminary changes to the Police Act coming this spring, so very soon. I urge the minister to include this as part of those changes. But we did get a response just yesterday saying, which isn't surprising, saying that they need a lot more time to consider the implications of kind of phasing in changes instead of dumping 70% on us all at once, which is the status quo. So, but they are considering, there is a recommendation that a committee is considering about having a more incremental phased approach. But our challenges they're also, it's the same as I've pointed out to them. It's the same schedule. 2026 is when they're going to make the major changes to the Police Act. So we're not going to find out until we're going to get the census numbers and the changes to the Police Act at about the same time. So we're not, all we can do is, unfortunately, as this report indicates, follow what the legislation says right now, which is that we have to assume that we're going to have to pay the 70%, even if there may be changes announced in 2026. And in that case, maybe there will be, as Councillor Kroll has pointed out. I mean, if we're fortunate, and the government does listen to the town and UBCM. This has been brought up by all municipalities for years, the unfairness of this, and make changes, then we might have some reserves at that point. But we'll just have to see. Councillor Kroll.
Being proactive, I think, is a huge plus, because as we've discovered when we, developed our, did the investigation into what the cost of policing was going to be, that was before the existing police force had a union. They're trying to get their union on parity with other police forces. You look at the simple cost of a vehicle. Our detachment doesn't have cells. So there's a lot of costs that, the cost of policing is not getting cheaper, and criminals are becoming more cunning to only help add to the cost of policing. So it's, at least we're trying to be proactive here. So, I appreciate what the Director of Finance has done to set us up in good stead, and the council's support in making this happen.
Did I see Councillor Thompson too earlier when we were trying to, or was that was on the other item? Yeah, okay. Councillor DeAndrade?
I would just like to move option scenario 2B.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor Thompson. Any discussion? All those in favor? The motion carries. And anything else on this? I'm going to assume that Councillor Lumley is in favor, unless I hear otherwise.
In favor.
Okay. 3.4, annual tax burden analysis, and that's page 275.
Thank you, Mayor. And so this report is to provide information on the town's annual tax burden for the committee's review. And so this information is based on the BC Assessment completed roll, which is like a preliminary roll of assessments. We get the final roll, which is called the revised roll, in late March. There's generally quite limited changes in that, so these numbers are going to be quite close, but they'll be tweaked a bit once the revised roll comes in. And so the town's financial plan includes several objectives, one of which is to ensure the appropriate tax burden between Class 6, which is business other, as compared to Class 1, which is residential. And the tax burden is what the amount of taxes are paid by one class. So if you shift that burden, one goes down, others have to go up. And so Table 1 in my report shows the distribution from 2021 through 2024. And we had some relative changes this year. Class 1 average went down by 1.6% as compared to increases for Class 6, which increased by about 4.7%. And as a result of those shifts, the burden actually stayed pretty much on par with previous years. So no major change there, which would cause potentially something to address. And so so you'll see on page 2 of my report, the burden for Class 1 is 71.92%, and for business other, it's 25.97. And so since 2015, there's been a gradual trend to slightly decrease the tax burden from commercial to residential. And you can see in that graph there, the red bars indicate the residential tax burden slightly increasing over the years, and the green bars showing commercial slightly decreasing. If council did want to shift, then what happens, the rates, a shift in rates would be required if you want to bring down the burden of commercial even further. And really it results in, an overall increase, right now it's sitting at 8%. It would be more than 8% for residential, but less than 8% for commercial. I did provide an example in the report of what that would look like. Based on a 3% tax increase. But given that the burdens remain relatively steady over the last few years, I'm not recommending any shift at this point, and that overall tax increase would be applied evenly to all classes. Thank you.
Okay, so there's no recommendation. It's for information. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Thompson.
Through you, Mayor, I wanted to thank the Director of Finance for including the business tax multiplier. It was excellent to see because it gave the opportunity to compare to the national average, which is actually at 2.82. So, yeah, thank you.
CAO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just for clarity, and I wonder if the Director of Finance, we had a question recently about Class 6, and you just mentioned something being business or other. Like, is that other, is the rate is the same for, it's a bit of a misnomer perhaps?
Director.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, the Class 6 is, the description of Class 6 is business or other, and often, we just drop it to business because other's just a bit of a catch-all, so it's similar in some ways to general sundry. It's other, if they don't fit in other classes, they fit into Class 6, which happens to be business, but the majority is business. If you fit in Class 6, if you're business or other, you're still being charged the same rate. The same rate applies to your assessment. Yeah. I think I'm gonna change my notes in future and go business and other, just to make it clearer. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments on the report? Just waiting in case there's something from the dark screen.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, the screen is speaking.
Sorry, no one wants to look at me right now, but, yeah, thanks, Lorraine. Because I think businesses would be happy that their percentage or the rate hasn't gone up because everything else in their lives is going up, especially in the field that I'm in, which is food costs, garbage and organics, and there always seems to be something going up. So the fact that the town could keep it relatively on the level for small businesses, I think they'll be quite happy with you. Thank you.
Great. It's good to hear some positive words in this section of the budget for the first time in how many years now? 10 years? Councillor Kroll?
I'm just glad that the one business owner on council did make his comments, because I think having a business owner on the council is really significant. When we reduced or changed the percentage balance a couple of years ago, it was with Councillor Lumley's recommendations for, just the struggle owners were having. And, if they're paying less in taxes, hopefully they're paying more in wages to their employees. And that spills out to other businesses and the success of the community. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, I agree. Your attentiveness to this item has been appreciated over the years, Councillor Lumley, because it's something that we all, it's staff and council, should be striving for some fairness, and it's been your input's been helpful to get here. Councillor Kroll.
So do we need to move the recommendation that?
I don't think there's a recommendation. No, it's just that's for information. Is there one I'm not seeing, or?
Recommendation that any tax increase approval by council be applied evenly over. Is that?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. I put that in, but you don't really need to, because if you don't change anything, then I just apply it automatically. I just wanted to make it clear that that's what I'm saying, don't exactly. Thank you.
Okay, no motion needed. Next meeting of Committee of the Whole is March 19th, 2024 at 3 p.m. And looking for a motion to adjourn. Councillor DeAndrade, seconded by Councillor Thompson. All those in favor? The motion carries.